This is Your Superior Self, episode 64, with the Warrior Mom, JJ Virgin.
You know, my husband had these group of friends from college, and it's funny, the minute he started to step up into a bigger space, when we got together, they started to try to hold him back. Are those your friends? You know, I don't know. I mean, they just don't. So there's so many people that have a comfort zone of you being in a specific area and they don't want to see you. I see this in weight all the time. It's interesting when you look at weight, obesity is contagious, right? When you look at people and their weight, you tend to be the same weight as other friends that you are in, even if they live across the country. In fact, when people ask me what's one of the best things you can do to make sure you maintain your weight, I say find fitter friends. Hang out with them. Guess what? You know, same with if you want to be more successful, hang out with more successful people. So you just have to manage that. And honestly, if those people don't want to see you be a better version of yourself, are they really the people you should be spending your time around?
What is going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to the podcast that helps you get motivated to move forward in your life, Your Superior Self. I'm your host, Trey Downs, and I'm literally coming off of Cloud 9. I got to attend CadreCon this week, and it was phenomenal. We had a ton of great speakers, a ton of great people. We had speakers like Pete Vargas, Steve Young, Sam Horn, Ree Perez, Laura Gassner-Otting, and JJ Virgin with a special masterclass from the man, the myth, the legend, Seth Godin. And I actually got to ask Seth a question in his masterclass, which is a pretty funny story. So Seth comes into the conference, he goes up on stage and he's carrying this orange cube, and I have no clue what it is. I'm assuming it's some type of game that he's going to play with the audience, and sure enough, that's what it is. It's like a beanbag cube with a microphone in the middle of it, so that way he can throw it in the audience and they can ask questions. So he goes into his master class, and it's about 10 minutes, and then after the 10 minutes he starts throwing around the cube. People are asking him questions, getting fired up. He's answering these questions, and they're phenomenal answers. And he gets to walk into my side of the stage, and I'm like, you don't come to Seth Godin's masterclass and not ask a question, Trey. You have to ask a question. You have to ask a question. So I immediately threw my hand up, not knowing of what I wanted to ask, and he throws it to me. And while this cube is in the air, all I can think about is, please don't drop this cube. Please don't be that guy. So I successfully catch the cube, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have a question. I don't know what to ask. So I immediately deflect, and I want to buy some time. So I asked Mr. Godin, I say, Seth, I want to say thank you so much for answering all my emails. I know that I pester you. I know that I send you a ton, and the fact that you answer them, I just want to say I'm grateful and thank you. He laughs and he says, oh, you must be Trey at blah, 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 blah at gmail.com. And everybody erupts laughing. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then I quickly realize that I still don't have a question. So I look down, I have his book, The Linchpin, next to me. And thankfully, I remember in the back of the book when I was reading it, I actually thought to myself, there was an excerpt in there that he talks about us using our gifts for the world and trying to better the world. We should use our gifts. So I immediately asked him, I was like, Seth, you know, in Linchpin, you talk about people using their gifts for the betterment of the world. At what point in your life did you decide to use your gifts for the world, and what influenced that? And he immediately says, well, I didn't mean the whole world. And I'm like, oh God, maybe I just misinterpreted that excerpt. Maybe I misinterpreted what he meant. And then he was like, what I meant was your world and what the people inside of your world. You should use your gifts for those people. That way you can make these changes, because to try and change the entire world will be impossible. You can change people in your world, situations that are going on in your world immediately, and to use those gifts, your gifts, in that world, so that way you can better it and better those around you. And then a woman behind me, her cell phone starts going off non-stop. I mean, not like a quiet ringtone, not like a vibration. I'm talking about a loud and obnoxious ringtone. It might have been the Star Spangled Banner, I don't know, but I can't listen to what Seth is saying. His answer is this philosophical greatness It is going to change how I think and how I interpret the world. And I can't hear it because some lady behind me has this loud, crazy theme song. It might have been from Star Wars. I don't know. But Seth, if you're listening to this, please email me back with your answer. But to get back to business and why we're truly here, which is to honor the infamous JJ Virgin, who is a fitness and nutrition expert who has written multiple New York Times best-selling books, including The Virgin Diet, The Virgin Diet Cookbook, and JJ Virgin's Super Impact Diet. I want to start off the interview, before we get to that, with an excerpt from The Miracle Mindset. This is actually page 176, and it goes like this. Some of my friends who visited me in the hospital saw how I was functioning and said, "You're a superwoman." But my response was, "No, I'm super healthy. If I hadn't been on the top of my game before Grant's accident and continued to take care of myself, my son wouldn't have been still alive. I wouldn't have had the confidence, energy, or presence of mind to do what I had to do to succeed, and the result would have been a very different outcome. When Grant's accident forced me to become laser focused on the things that really mattered, I realized that my endless to-do list could have been trimmed down a few essential items all along. I only wish I could have done this sooner. I already knew before the accident that I was failing my boys and myself by not being present, but I didn't have a compelling enough reason to make a change. I knew I could do better, but I was comfortable with the status quo, and it unfortunately took Grant's accident to serve as a big wake-up call to make a change. I realized that when we are comfortable, we often don't take things as seriously as we should. We become complacent, whether it's by fully investing financially or emotionally in a big, scary goal. It takes getting a little uncomfortable to force ourselves to do the necessary work to succeed. There is no way to start a business, save a life, or just push further without taking an enormous leap of faith. Progress requires risk. It is as simple as that. That risk has to mean something. It has to be worth it. And when you make that progress non-negotiable, you have no choice but to face the fear and take that risk. I am super pumped about my conversation with JJ. So without further ado, here is JJ Virgin. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. Today, I am excited. I am fired up. I am all of the above because I have JJ Virgin on the show. She is a celebrity nutrition and fitness expert and 4-time New York Times bestselling author. JJ, thank you for taking the time to come on.
My pleasure.
So, real quick, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what you're up to today? What are you working on?
Right now, I'm in the middle of a big move. I'm sitting in my family room because we haven't gotten my Wi-Fi set up, but I'm sitting here in Tampa because I fled California. So that's what I've been working on is the move to Florida.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Like West Coast, East Coast? What do you like? What do you prefer?
I actually love them both. I lived in Fort Lauderdale once before, and now I'm in Tampa, so it's West Coast, very different. But I love California and I love Florida, but I like the tax situation of Florida a lot more, let me tell you.
I'm sure there's a ton of people that agree with you on that one.
Oh my gosh, it looks like everyone from New York and California is fleeing.
Well, I'm from Maryland. I'm ready to go down there with you.
Yeah, well, it's 80 degrees right now, and my mom just pinged me from Northern California. She's like, "It's 40." I'm like, "Well, come here."
Oh man! So why don't you go ahead and talk about Warrior Mom? Like, what inspired that?
Warrior Mom, the book I never really wanted to write because the story is not one you want to actually live through, but it worked out really well, and it kind of makes you realize that when you meet the coolest people and the most successful people, there seem to be the people that have gone through the most stuff. And when it comes down to it in life, when you start to think about it, life's all about how you show up when stuff gets hard, because the one thing we know for sure is stuff's going to get hard, right? Warrior Mom came to be because right before my first big book, Virgin Diet, came out, it was literally, I think, a month out from that book coming out, and I'd invested everything into that book. I was a single mom, sole financial support for my kids, and I had literally taken my full advance from the book, invested it in the launch of that book because I just felt like that book could go out and help a ton of people. So basically, my back was against the wall, and it had to work. And now it's a month out and it's full court press, which when you've got a book coming out, the month before the book comes out is crazy time. And my son Grant, I had two sons, and one was 15, Bryce, and one was 16. And my son Grant, the 16-year-old, was crossing the street at dusk. And we have no idea how that happened because there were only two people who were there. And one was my son Grant, who was hit while crossing the street by a car going about 40 miles an hour. And all we know is that a neighbor saw her get out of her car, gasped, get back in her car and drive off. And fortunately, he pulled his truck around and saved my son's life from oncoming traffic. But he was airlifted to the local hospital. By the time we got there, and we were just lucky, like it's amazing how many things have to line up. Now, I guess you could look at this two different ways. You could go, oh my gosh, he got hit. But I look at it and go, all the things had to line up for us to be able to know it was him that got hit and then to be able to do what we needed to do to save his life. But my other son, Bryce, and my ex-husband stumbled upon the accident scene, and a policeman came up and said a boy that looked just like Bryce got hit because, they're a year apart, they look alike. So we raced off to the hospital. The doctors there told us that my son had suffered a very serious accident and that sometime in the next 24 hours he was going to die. And I just left it at that. Like sometime in the next 24 hours, he said he's got a torn aorta that kills 90% of the people on the scene. Sometime in the next 24 hours, it is going to rupture and he will die unless he has a very specific surgery that we can't do here because he's got multiple brain bleeds and it requires this special surgery that he'll never survive the airlift to the next hospital to get. And even if he were to survive the airlift, he's not going to be able to survive that surgery. And even if he were to survive both those things, he'd be so brain damaged, it wouldn't be worth it. And, I'm listening to this. I don't know. Are you a parent?
Oh, yeah. I have, I just had my third. I have two girls and a boy. The boy is 8 and Ava is 6. And then the newborn is 2 months.
Yeah, I think every parent gets so offended when they hear that. They're like, wouldn't be worth it. And my son Bryce is looking at this doctor and says, well, like maybe a 0.25% chance he'd make it. And the doctor said, yeah, that sounds about right. And he goes, well, that's not zero, And I go, so, and I said to the doctor, so for sure he's dying if he stays here. And the doctor said, yes. I go, but there's the slightest chance he may make it if we airlift him. He goes, yes, but he's not going to make it. I go, but there's a chance. It's like, so we'll take those odds. Like we're doing that. The doctor was so upset with us. We read the medical report later and he was like, I told them not to do that. We actually tried to interview him for the documentary we made called You Are Stronger Than You Think because, I made the decision that night that not only was Grant going to survive this thing, if it was up to me, that he was going to be better than before the accident. And he is. But I also realized in writing the book Warrior Mom that the book wasn't about my son surviving. It was really about how I showed up, how my other son showed up, how my ex-husband showed up, how we all had to show up no matter what happened. That was the real story. And really, that's the story in life. You can't control those outcomes, but you can control how you show up, which ultimately is all done through your mindset.
Who is a warrior mom?
Really it's warrior moms and warrior dads, right? A warrior mom, and I honestly don't understand how every parent isn't this way from the minute, especially like I know I was like this the minute I was pregnant with my first son and I was walking down a street in Santa Monica and these two thuggy guys started walking towards me and I thought, I will take you both out and you will be done. It was like there was a thing inside me that was like, I will do whatever it takes to protect my child. And I think that, the minute you have kids, you get that. There's a switch gets flipped on that says, I need to do whatever is the best for my child. My life is like, second place to them. They are the most important thing. Do whatever you need to do. And that's what a warrior mom or warrior dad does. They fight for their kids. And it doesn't mean that they're always the most popular with their kids, right? You see this as a parent. I remember my mom said this to me once. She goes, I'm your mom. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be your friend. I'm like, got it.
You were trying to finish this book while your son was in the hospital, right?
No, I did not. I was launching the Virgin Diet while my son was.
Okay.
I didn't write this book until a couple years ago. I didn't want to write this book. What actually happened was my agent. I wrote the Virgin Diet, then I did the Virgin Diet cookbook, then I did the Sugar Impact Diet and the Sugar Impact Diet cookbook. And my agent pestered me and pestered me and pestered me because she got pregnant with twins after I'd gone through all of this. And her first doctor wanted her to abort. She said, the twins have a problem. You're going to lose them. You need to just abort. And she refused to do it. And she fought and she fought and she fought. And she now has two beautiful boys. And she said, I kept thinking, if you can pull this off, I can pull this off. And you need to tell this story. And I'm like, I don't want to tell this story. Here's the thing. You write a diet book. If someone doesn't like your diet book, it's your diet book. They're not saying, hey, you suck. I don't like you. But when you do this, you're like pulling back, because there was no way Trey to write this book without just going, you know what? I'm pulling back the kimono. Here's everything. Here's how I was feeling. Here's how scared I was. Here's how mad I was. Here's where I did crappy stuff. Here's where I did great stuff. Here's what was going on with my kids. I had to tell the whole story. Couldn't just tell part of it, right? And so if people don't like the book, they don't like me. It's a whole different ballgame. And it's a lot easier to write a diet book, is all I have to say.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, you're writing a lot about what your, factual information in diet books. This one is you have to be very transparent, right? Like you said, you have to talk about your experiences. Like, tell me about when you first released it, when it first went public and you launched the book. Like, what were you feeling?
Well, it's interesting. I wrote the book, and I also decided, because I'd always done PBS shows with my books, and I thought, well, this isn't really like a PBS show. I'll do a documentary. And I had made a point of never knowing where the accident really happened. And there was a lot of stuff that I go, I don't need to know that. Because even just driving down the street near my house would give me like such bad PTSD. And to do the documentary, I had to go back and I had to see things I'd never wanted to see. And I had to relive a whole lot of stuff. And I go, well, this really stinks. Like, I didn't think this one through. And then when I'm going to release the book, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do interviews. I was like, this is awful. Like, I don't, people are like, is this cathartic? I go, no, it's really actually not cathartic. It's just really awful, to keep telling the story over and over again. And then as I was telling the story, I started to get emails from people telling me about their own stories and about how they'd used some of the things that I talked about in Warrior Mom and it made a difference in their relationship with their kids, or they had a better outcome. And all of a sudden you go, this is very different. Like, hey, I love health and helping people get healthier. But boy, if you help someone shift their mindset and all of a sudden they have a better relationship with their kids, or they ask for a second opinion and were able to save their kid's life, that's like a big, big difference, right? Like, all of a sudden I'm helping kids who had brain injuries. One of my buddies is in the fish oil business. He says, you've done more for fish oil sales than, any medical lecturer has done in the last decade. Because I went on the doctors and Dr. Oz and Sanjay Gupta, CNN, and talked about the story and what we did to help bring Grant back. Because Grant shouldn't, by every single medical story, Grant should not be here. He, he had everything against him. My gosh, he had 13 fractures. They told me he'd never walk again. He wouldn't hear again. He wouldn't be able to talk. He wouldn't, on and on and on, and this morning he sent me some pictures he drew. He showed me the plants he's growing. He works out every day. So, this is why it's so important to run your own race and to not listen to what people tell you can't do. In fact, we used to tease Grant and call him Grant Never Ever. It's like, Grant never gonna, you're not supposed to be able to do, stop talking. You're not supposed to be able to do that. And I also realized that, I think we're never better than when we're challenged. And when he started getting depressed, when he felt like he wasn't getting challenged, like I was trying to treat him too carefully after the accident. And I finally just went, I'm going to challenge you every single step of the way. And every time I do, he steps up to it. Right. And I think we all tend to do that.
That's pretty powerful. I mean, you're trying to work on the Virgin Diet, and this happens to you, this tragedy. Like, how do you one, as a mother, deal with both of those? One, a deadline for the book or trying to release it, and then two, having your son in the hospital, trying to fight for his life. Like, how do you balance that?
I have some great pictures of me sitting in the hospital next to him in the ICU. He is literally on a ventilator, with a central line, and I've got my laptop open, right? And I'm right there with him, like talking away to him, because he literally said to me, he goes, Mom, the gray man came down and asked me if I wanted to live or die. And I really didn't want to stay, but I kept hearing you talk to me. So I figured I'll just come back. I was like, I knew you could hear me. But here's what I will tell you about that. When I looked at what had to happen, that not only did I need to make this book go, because the things that I've done to help Grant come back to better than before the accident pretty much weren't covered by insurance. We did, beyond just like high dose fish oil and hyperbaric and neurofeedback, we've done stem cells, we've done a lot of stuff, and it's not covered by insurance. So I just was sitting there going, okay, in order for me to do whatever I need to do, I'm going to need to make this book go. If I'm bankrupt, this is not going to work. So I had to make the book work, but I also discovered a couple different things. The third leading cause of death is death by doctor. And it really is because, hospitals are crazy, chaotic places. We were in an amazing hospital. It was a teaching hospital. Grant had these huge books of his records. There's no way anyone could come in, rotate in on their shift, and know what the heck was going on. So I wanted to make sure I was there all the time. And if I wasn't there, my ex-husband was there. That was super important. But I think for kids, their leading cause of death is brain injury. It's especially boys. And you have a boy. I always knew in the house if it was quiet, there was something really bad going on. But, they would dive off the top of the entertainment center, head first into the sofa. I'm like, what are you doing? It's just what boys do. You're like, oh. So I was determined to be there the whole time for Grant. And so I realized that, first of all, it's amazing how many things we spend our time doing during the day that we don't need to do. So anything that I either deleted, I asked someone else to do, or I got it automated. It was like ADD, automate, delegate, delete, right? And there's a whole lot of stuff that's not important. And then I realized that the only way to pull this off was I could not get sick, because you can't go into the ICU if you're sick, right? I had to go in there with a mask and gloves and a gown on anyway. And so I decided that to be able to pull this off and be there for my son and my other son and make this book go, that I was going to put my health and self-care at the top of the list. And then it was Grant, and then it was the book. And that's the way I did it. I made sure I got my sleep every night. I mean, I work in health. Most people say, I'll start that diet tomorrow, I'll do that. It was like, there was no margin for error. There's no having cookies. There's no stealing from sleep. I was getting my sleep every night, 8 to 9 hours. I was working out every day, even if it just meant I was bursting up and down the hospital stairs. I was eating super healthy. I had friends bringing me stuff. Even Whole Foods started delivering baskets to the hospital for me. Shout out to Whole Foods. I took a ton of supplements. I did everything that I needed to do to make sure that I was game on all the time, because under that level of stress, there's no margin for error.
That is a resilient mindset. And how do you build that? Can anybody build that? Or is it only the strong minded? Is it, can I work if I feel like I have a weak mindset, can I work my way up to that?
I have a great picture I love that someone took of me at an event speaking, and it says, and I'm standing with my arms out, and it says, mindset's a muscle. And it's so true. There's this great research by this PhD, Carol Dweck out of Stanford, who looked at two types of mindsets. And she calls it fixed versus growth. I call it victim versus warrior. A fixed mindset believes life happens to them. There's nothing they can do to change their circumstance. And fortunately, what's cool is anyone can build a resilient mindset, and it's free. It doesn't cost money to do this. You can absolutely learn it. I just was lucky, and I actually didn't even remember any of this till I wrote the book, because people were like, how were you able to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. I just did. Well, I've forgotten that at the age of 30, I had a mentor who came into my life, and I thought she was coming into my life because she wanted to teach me how to be successful in business. At the time, I was a personal trainer, and I was in grad school, And she was like, all right. So we were walking down the beach one day. I was supposedly training her. And she says, so why are you in grad school? And I go, well, I want to be more successful and help more people. She goes, oh, all right. That's great. What are you going to do when you graduate? I go, I'm going to go to doctoral school. Right. And she goes, oh, why are you going to do that? And I go, well, because I want to be successful and help more people. It was like, duh. Right. And she goes, well, Now, this is a woman who had a high school education. She literally grew up in a trailer park in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. And she's looking at me, high school education. She goes, oh, and she's a multimillionaire. And she was known as a mindset trainer, and she trained more people to be successful. She was like this amazing woman. And she's looking at me, and all of a sudden I'm looking at her like, oh, this woman like has a high school education. She goes, those things don't correlate. And I go, they don't. Because when I went to college, I went to UCLA, and at UCLA, everything, you get to college and you're supposed to go to grad school. And that was just it. And I just accepted it. So she goes, no, I'll teach you how to be more successful. And I said, great. I literally sold my business, my personal training business, and moved into her house. And I moved into her house, and the first thing she had me do, she was going to teach me how to be successful, was she had me put a little rubber band on my wrist. And every time that I thought a negative or limiting belief, I was supposed to snap my wrist. And I'm thinking, I just sold my business and I moved into your house, and you were having me wear rubber bands and snap my wrist. And oh my gosh, what have I done? This is so stupid. What am I, big mistake, right? And, but I was in, so I did that. It's amazing how quickly you can train yourself to just absolutely stop in the negativity. She had me manage everything, like what I was reading, what I was watching, and no more news. And at the time, it was Sony Walkmans and tapes, and I was listening to Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and all these great sales trainers and mindset trainers, Brian Tracy, and that's all I did. And I did it for months and months and months, and it completely changed the way that I thought and did. Every morning I'd get up in gratitude. I'd write down 3 things that I was grateful for. I told someone what I appreciated about them throughout the day. So, it was what was helped me get through all of this. If I hadn't had that in there, I don't know how I would have gotten through this, but I knew how to handle crises. I knew that there were no victims, there were only volunteers, and that it was all about how you showed up, and she trained me how to do it. So by the time I got to this situation, I'd gone through enough hard things in my life that I knew how to handle this. And I think that the reframe for all of us is, if you look at the most successful people, they weren't handed something. What the most successful people have that's different than the people that are not as successful is the ability to be resilient, to tolerate higher levels to stress, to look at something as a challenge, to go game on, to look at, like I stood in the hospital that first night, looked at my ex-husband and said, all right, we get a do-over. Let's make him better than he was before. And we just went, that's it. And it was not easy. It was scary as hell. You'd come in there, he'd be in a coma. There was no idea if he'd ever get out of it. And we just, every day, it was a mindset management. And every day when he woke up, it was managing his mindset so that he would feel the same way that I kept telling him, Grant, you're going to be 110%. I need you to fight. Your name means warrior. We've got this. You just do your part.
I don't think a lot of people realize how much negativity affects like our surroundings. Like, you continuously think about negative thoughts. You put yourself, you literally surround yourself with negativity all the time. What are some of the daily things that you do today that kind of helps your mindset?
And, there's one other piece of that I think is now a new issue that we have. One of the cool things that Facebook has done is keep like some of the negative, nasty stuff off their platform, but they've also created something that's almost is equally bad. And Brené Brown talks about it. I love the way she says this. She says, comparison kills joy, stay in your lane. Oprah Winfrey says, put your blinders on and run your own race. Don't look back. Just like negativity is a problem, so is all of this looking at everybody else's fabulous fake life and thinking yours isn't as good instead of just running your own race. And so that's something that you have to do every day. Right? So every day you have the opportunity to create your reality, and we really can. So it's like, what's that big why that keeps you pushing forward? Now, when I first was in college, my big why was not to have a job. I was like, how am I able to be in business for myself so I never have to go sit in an office? What can I do? And then once I was a personal trainer, I was like, how do I impact more people? How do I help 1 million people? And then all of a sudden I was on Dr. Phil for a couple of years straight. And I went, all right, checked off help 1 million people. Actually did like 10. How do I help 1 billion? Right. And so how do you just keep getting a why that drives you to make a bigger difference in your life, to leave a legacy? I mean, once you have kids, like your biggest why is, how do I show up and help make these humans amazing, right? Right? I mean, that's the most important legacy that there is, or your kids. So those are the things I think that help you show up every single day. But the cool thing is you completely control this. You do, but you have to manage your environment, and you have to be so careful with what you let in. I love podcasts because you can absolutely control it. Social media is, to me, just the opposite. You've got all this ridiculous stuff coming in, and it's generally not going to be good for you. It's not going to be helpful. Versus podcasts, gosh, I'm a podcast fiend because, you can just listen to great stuff all day long when you're at the gym or walking or whatever.
You've been podcasting for a while now. I think you're up to like 200 and something episodes, right?
I think I was trying to find what I discovered on my podcast was that we lost like a year or so, just disappeared. Because I was like, I thought I was podcasting longer than this. So now I think I've been podcasting since 2015. I should have started sooner, but I had a marketing guy with me who was like, those podcasts, those are never going to take on hold, blah, blah, blah. Because I was like, I really want to do a podcast. Oh, that's a waste of time. And then I finally just ignored him and did it anyway. And I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. It's super fun to have your own, because you can get all these fun people and interview them. So anyone you ever want to talk to, you just have them as a guest, right? It's a great way to catch up with friends you don't get to talk to very often. And, it's fun for people to hear that too.
Absolutely. It's like, you talk about the mentor, right? The aspect of having a mentor is priceless. I mean, even though you have to pay an hourly fee for some of them, but having a podcast, you can interview people like yourself who are huge influencers. And I'm getting like an hour, Q&A with JJ Virgin. I mean, that's phenomenal, right? Like I'm getting your take on things and your philosophy. I want to know, like, for the diet aspect, like, right, you created the Virgin Diet, like this book. I love what you're about. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. How can someone fix their diet? Like, there's so many diets out there, right? There's the Atkins diet. There's the South Beach diet. Like, is there one that works for everyone? Like, I know, keto's like big right now. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness. You just asked me like 12 questions in one. All right. So here it is. This will be my final book at some point on diet. So we really need 2 words. This is the problem. I think it's like Eskimos have like 20 words for snow or snowflake or something. We have a problem in that diet means a diet like keto or paleo or vegan. And it also means what you eat every day. And these are 2 different things. And when people say diets don't work, that's because they're taking something that's a thing, like going on a ketogenic diet or doing intermittent fasting, and they're extending it out to how you eat every day. So we have what we do every day are basically, 365 plan, and these diets. And there's 3 different ways that you can really manipulate a diet. It's either which foods are you eating, and that's where vegetarian can fall in, food intolerance like the Virgin Diet can fall in, or maybe something like histamine intolerance or nightshades, or paleo, right? There's that. Which foods should you be eating? And those are different for everybody. And it also changes throughout your lifespan. So, I don't believe anyone should eat gluten for a variety of reasons. I think gluten's just a lame food. Ditto corn, because it's so genetically modified, and non-organic, non-fermented soy. So there's certain foods that just suck, like processed foods, oils, damaged oils, and sugars. No one should be eating that. Like agave is a sucky food. Artificial sweeteners, bad. But for the most part, which foods are going to depend on what's going on with you. If you've got an autoimmune disease, if you've got issues with inflammation, et cetera. Then you've got how much of different foods should you eat. This is where ketogenic diets, low carb diets, low fat diets all fall in. A lot of this has to do with genetics. Some people genetically actually have to eat a low fat diet. Thank God I'm not one of those. But how many carbohydrates you need is going to depend on what's going on with your adrenal health, what's going on with your insulin health, and how athletic are you. It will vary based on that. So that's going to impact whether should you do a ketogenic diet. I don't know. It depends on what's going on with your thyroid, your adrenals, your exercise levels, right? Then, so which food should you eat? How much of different macronutrients should you eat? And then when should you eat? Should you do fasting? Should you do intermittent fasting? So there's some kind of basic foundational stuff that everybody should be doing, like eat more vegetables, drink more water, get at least a 12-hour overnight fast, stop snacking. These are basic things. But beyond that, it really depends on where you are in your health, your genetics, what your goals are, what your lifestyle's like. And what I like to do is use each of those different types of diets, whether it's a ketogenic diet or the virgin diet or paleo. I like to use those short term to get an outcome and then take what worked well and pull it into your everyday eating plan. Get stable, then go to the next goal, right? Because the only thing that really matters here is that you're able to learn things and put them into your everyday eating plan, right? And then go from there. But, this idea that there's one thing and you get people fighting over this. And I live in the world of nutritionists and docs, and it's like they're arguing with each other. And I go, that's just ridiculous. Like, there's a couple things for sure. There were no vegans in the wild. They died of nutrient deficiencies. So if you're going to be a vegan, you're going to have to supplement. And sorry, when you get vegans sitting there telling that you should not eat meat because of, all of this research, well, they're looking at factory meat, and that's entirely different than all of the game meat and wild fish, et cetera. So I think we have to look at that. I'm not saying that someone couldn't be a vegan, but if they do want to be a vegan, they're going to have to supplement. And there were no vegans in the wild. They would have had B12 deficiency. They would have had omega-3. They would have died. So, if you're going to do that, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful and mindful if you're doing it. And don't compare a factoried animal diet to a wild animal diet, because they're entirely different things, right? It's like comparing GMO plants to non-GMO plants. They're entirely different foods. So we really have to compare apples to apples. And that's where I think a lot of the fighting and silliness comes down to. But we've got to take into account with a diet, what are your genetics? What's your current state of health? What's your current state of activity? What's your current lifestyle? What are you willing to do, right? And then look at it. But clearly, we have an obesity epidemic not because of genes. Because if you look at where we are now versus where we were 100 years ago, we were 0.5% obesity 100 years ago. We're 30 to 35% obesity now. So if it was just no, it's now 70. It's overweight is 30% now. It's now we're more obese than overweight. But clearly, if it was genetics, it couldn't have increased in 30% in 100 years, right? It doesn't work that way. So we know what happened over that 100 years, and it's toxins and sugar and EMFs and lights and stress and all that.
Ah, man. I have the health expert in front of me, and I am blanking on what health questions I should ask. I know that I have so many questions about sugar. I have, as a parent, right? So as a parent, sports, we're always running around, dance, soccer, baseball, all of that extracurricular activities. How can a parent like myself, have the best diet that works for me, and two, try to cut out sugar?
So first of all, the most important thing you can think of is that your kids are going to do what you do, not what you say. I always looked at parents who would be smoking and go, you want your kids to smoke? Oh, no. I'm like, well, then stop it. It's like whatever you're doing, they're watching. So use that as your guilt trip if you are still behaving badly, right? I think the single worst thing of all are artificial sweeteners. Like that is the worst science experiment we ever did. I can't believe that we even put them in kids' food. It's so awful. So don't do any artificial sweeteners. You're better off having a regular soda than a diet soda, but don't have a regular soda either. Um, you know, exposure equals preference, and you have such an opportunity with kids to teach them to like vegetables, and it's not easy. I mean, my kids left to their own devices would have eaten chicken fingers, pizza, and macaroni and cheese and burgers. But what I did was you keep exposing them to it and you involve them. So you have them help you make broccoli, little treats. You have them help you make salad. Don't give them big sharp knives, but you have them help you do stuff. And one of my buddies is like, if you have to put chocolate on the broccoli to get them to eat it, do it. Do what you need to do. But I had my kids, if we were going to have a treat, we went out for a treat. So I knew how to put that into the right perspective. We didn't keep that stuff in the house. If we were going to go out and get something, they had dinner first and then they would go out. Because the cool thing with kids versus adults is they actually get full. Like we've like completely lost that whole I'm full. I don't need dessert. This is silly. So that was the first thing. I also never wanted to make dinner times a war zone, right? But there's this idea. I remember soccer practice. Moms would bring just this garbage stuff. It's like just bring some healthy snacks, like I don't know, bananas, right? And some water. They're not out there for 3 hours. They don't need Gatorade. It's garbage stuff anyway. Just bring some regular water and bring some bananas for them to have as a snack instead of something crappy. Or bring some rice chips and some almond butter or some celery and almond butter. But just keep exposing them to the healthy stuff and they'll eat it. And breakfast, lunch, dinner, they may need a snack. They're growing. You don't. This whole snacking thing has got to get gone. Like when you look at snacking, it all happened. We started cutting the fat out because people were hungry all the time. Every time you eat, you drive up blood sugar and you drive up insulin. If you're eating every 2 to 3 hours, you're never letting insulin come back down and you start to become a sugar burner, not a fat burner. Your body can't even access stored fat for fuel. So you're going to be hungry all the time. And that then leads to belly fat, leads to insulin resistance, and leads to diabetes. So you want to be eating breakfast an hour or two after waking up. Super important to have breakfast. The whole intermittent fasting, breakfast skipping, especially for kids and women, has not played out. Raises cortisol, raises blood pressure in women, lowers kids' performance at school. And then just breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Kids can have a little snack when they come home and an earlier dinner, not a later one. And then shut the kitchen and teach your kids not to eat after dinner.
That's huge.
It's huge. If you were going to pick one thing to make the biggest difference, people are skipping breakfast. Don't skip breakfast. Skip dinner. It's like if you're going to skip a meal, skip your evening meal, not your morning meal. But close the kitchen after dinner. Like, what are you piling on the food for? Like,
I never thought about that. Like I always thought the intermittent fasting was for breakfast, and the 12 hours started after dinner to lunch.
Because someone came out with that, and that actually is absolutely. If you look at all of the research, I'm doing a segment this week on a TV show here on should you eat breakfast, and I started out with a completely open mind I'd always told people they should eat within an hour of waking up. Then I went, okay, an hour or two. But I thought, all right, let's really look at this. Should you eat breakfast or should you not? Because all that intermittent fasting, they're like, oh, skip breakfast, have lunch and dinner. But if you really look at the research, if you're going to intermittent fast, and there's a lot of good data for it, have a little later breakfast, have an early dinner, and then close the kitchen and stop eating. The data shows that breakfast is super key because it gets your metabolism going. It lowers your stress hormones, right? And if you're not eating breakfast and your stress hormones are going up, you're not breaking down fat, you're breaking down muscle. So that's the last thing that you want to be doing. So if you look at the research, when people eat breakfast, better metabolism, they burn more calories overall, they make better food choices throughout the day, they have better focus. Where you want to stop is you want to stop after dinner. And ideally, you want to eat your dinner earlier. You want to give yourself at least 3 to 4 hours before bed, but even better if it's longer than that. So early dinner, close the kitchen, little bit later breakfast, and then have one other meal if you need it. It's like a lot of this stuff that we do now, the breakfast, the big lunch, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner was because of all the farmers. It's not the way, we're not farming. Right? We're sitting on our butts. So, and it's like this stuff has just become indoctrinated into us. And then it was breakfast. I remember way back when breakfast, a snack, lunch, a snack, dinner, and then even a snack after dinner. I'm like, what? Why? What are you having a snack for? And there was literally, I keep wanting to do a podcast on this. I haven't done it yet, but there was a recent thing that came out. I printed it out on what nutritionists like to have as a snack before bed. And I thought, oh, this is great. It's fantastic. I mean, it was the most ridiculous article where all these nutritionists were citing what they had as a snack before bed to keep them full all night long. I'm like, what are you doing when you're sleeping? Like, what are you doing? You do not want to eat before bed. It raises it when you eat before bed. It's going to actually suppress growth hormone response. You do not need to be digesting while you're sleeping. You should be healing while you're sleeping. You want your stomach to be empty because then the raise in ghrelin triggers a raise in growth hormone. Do not eat before bed. You're not running a marathon. It is just ridiculous.
What does JJ Virgin's daily, I guess, menu look like? What do you do when you wake up? What do you do for lunch? What do you do for dinner?
Every morning I wake up and I have a little bit of black bulletproof coffee beans, unless I've got Dave with me and he makes me bulletproof coffee the way I like it. But if I can't have Dave make it, I'm not doing it. Oh, it's so awesome. So my husband makes me this foamed up coconut milk. So I have unsweetened coconut milk. He foams it up and he gets up in the morning. He goes and does this. We have espresso and coffee. He puts this whole thing together, makes me the perfect thing. And I have 1 or 2 cups of that in the morning. And then generally it's kind of shifted now as I moved to Tampa. It's been kind of weird because I'm going back and forth between East Coast and West Coast. So what I found here is generally I'll have a bar for breakfast. Instead, I have these collagen bars that I have, my own collagen bars. And then I'll do a shake kind of later. At home on the West Coast, I do a shake first thing. And then I have lunch and dinner. Here, I've been doing more of a bar, and then I'll do a shake later, and then I'll have dinner. So it's funny when I'm on the East Coast because I'm kind of having a naturally later breakfast, earlier dinner. It's kind of a cooler time thing. So I'm sort of trying to keep it that way. But my general eating each day is a shake. A lot of times I'll have one of my collagen bars, and then dinner is always some kind of protein. Like tonight we're having pastured pork, we're having these little potatoes, and then we're having broccoli with ghee. And then, I'll either have a bar or I'll have a salad. So, it's either 2 meals and a snack or 2 meals or 3 meals. And it's always the lunch one is either a smoothie, a bar, or a salad. Real basic stuff. I mean, I eat vegetables, I eat protein, I eat fat, and I eat, a little bit of a slow, low carb at night because it helps me sleep.
So looking at all of your success, from the books to the TV shows to everything, do you attribute it to luck or?
Yep, it's all luck. It's totally luck. It's not one bit of it.
Really?
No, not one bit. Like maybe there were a couple lucky things, but I was thinking about, okay, so I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years. Here's what happened. I was helping a doctor get all of her business online. Another doctor said, I need help with that too. I said, great, I'll help you. He goes, and I'm on Dr. Phil. Can you come over? We're going to be doing these tapings in this house and I need some help. Sure, I'll be there. I was supposed to be on an airplane with Kiss and Aerosmith because Gene Simmons was my client. I turned it down and I went and I worked for free in a mansion in Beverly Hills behind the scenes, helping this doctor with all of the weight loss challengers on Dr. Phil. And then for 2 years, I was on Dr. Phil working for free, helping all of the challengers do their thing. So you can say that was luck, but I worked my ass off 30 hours a week for free for 2 years straight. Just working, helping. And then, like similar stuff, all this stuff. When you really get down to it, people are successful because they grind it out. All of the things I've done, thousands and thousands of interviews. I've spoken on all these stages, but my first stages were 3 people would show up, and I would do the same amount of energy as if I was on a stage for 5,000 people. And you just grind it out, and you get up every day, and it's hard, and people are mean, and there's haters, and you just grind it out every day, right? I mean, that's it. So, and people ask, what is it? I go, you know what? Here it is. Every day you wake up and you go, you just feel so flippin' lucky to be able to do what you do. And some days you don't know how you're going to pay the bills. And I actually had to have my office manager at one point. She put her life savings in my bank account, and she didn't even tell me she was doing it because she had no idea I was going to pay my mortgage. I didn't either. I just was like, you know what? We're going to get through this. And I just knew that I was supposed to be doing what I was doing. And you just grind it out and you work your butt off and you help as many people as you can. And, that's it. That's my secret to success.
Was there any time like in the early days where you wanted to give up and like do something
There
else?
was one time. I remember I had, I'd done my first book. No one bought it. And I was on Freaky Eaters, and I was waiting to hear if our second season was going to get picked up. And I was sitting in a mastermind, and nothing was working, and I was making like barely any money. I was barely squeaking by. And I went into the mastermind to tell them all that I thought I needed to quit and get a job, which is really funny because I've had like one job in my whole life, and I got fired in like 3 months. So I go in there, I said, I think I need to get a job. And they laugh, but like everyone laughs. And they brought in a hand analyst, Beth Davis, and she said, I'm going to read your hands. And I'm like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever. Okay, fine, read my hands, like hooey, right? And she reads my hands. She goes, you're supposed to be in the spotlight. It's who you are. So you can either decide just to show up, or it's going to keep chasing you. And I'm like, all right, I'll show up. And I get a phone call while I'm at that mastermind saying that TV show had been picked up for a second season. And then that was right when that whole thing happens, when I sold the Virgin Diet for $500,000. Like all this stuff just went. It was just like I needed someone to kick me in the butt and go, you know what? You need to step up, and you showing up bigger isn't going to take away from anybody else. You'll be able to help a whole lot of other people step up bigger too. And it was almost like I just needed permission. And, but I remember I was like literally walked into that event going, I need a job. I'm going to quit. So yes, we all get there. And that's why you need to be in a mastermind group. That's why you need to have coaches who will be like, no, you're not either. Stop it. Like, just get back out there and grind some more.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like the importance of a mentor, because you can go out there and grind all you want, but if you don't have any direction, it's like you're not going to go anywhere.
Right. You can't grind in the wrong direction. And, I mean, the way I found the right direction was to grind and be, I think that having audiences is the most important thing. Go speak in places, because if you suck, people will leave. And that's great. You want to know early on, like you don't want to spend all your time on something. I had one doc I was coaching, and she said, listen, I've got this great program. It's a 6-month program on how to build better bones. I go, that's a terrible idea. It will not sell. And she was working with someone outside of the health field. And she goes, he's been working with me on it. It was a big name person. And I go, yeah, but he's not in our field. I can tell you this will not sell. And the reason I know it will not sell is because I pull people off of dairy, and their number one question is about calcium and how to build great bones. And I basically couldn't give a bone building program away. It's not sexy. People just want to know how to lose weight, look younger, and have better sex. That's it. Bottom line. And so she builds this whole thing, spends all this money with this guy. And guess what? Got on a great platform, 3,000 people tuned in, and she sold like 1. And I go, sorry, I told you so. Like, don't waste your time. If it's the same program, just say this is how you're going to lose your belly fat, and you'll sell all of them. But that's why we need to have audiences. We need to have social proof. And when you find that thing that hits, because I didn't wake up one morning and go, oh, I'm going to do the virgin diet. It hit because I was talking about a whole lot of things that got in the way of you losing weight, could cause you to gain weight, one of them being food intolerance. People didn't even know what it was at the time. They thought it was an allergy. I'm like, no, it's an intolerance. And I put food intolerance on the map, and I wouldn't have recognized it, but people kept asking about it. And that was what they wanted to know about. And we all have that sitting right under our nose, but we'll never see it ourselves. You have to have coaches around you who can see it and who can help you, and a group of people who are positive when things get hard. And it can't be, the friends you had in high school who are going to think you're crazy and weird, right? I don't have any of my friends from high school or college. Like, nope. All my friends are my entrepreneurial friends that I've met in the last decade.
Wow. Well, how do you deal with that?
Yep.
Like, how do you deal with the people trying to drag you down?
I don't
No?
have any people that drag me down.
Well, I'm saying like
don't.
right now, the listener, right? So if the listener is trying to create something, create success, and they're trying to level up a little bit, and they have that group of friends, like, how do you get away from that? I mean, what tactic worked for you? You just ignore them?
Find new friends. To me, if these people are trying to drag you down, are they your friends? Because I don't think so. My husband had these group of friends from college, and it's funny, the minute he started to step up into a bigger space, when we got together, they started to try to hold him back. Are those your friends? I don't know. I mean, they just don't. So there's so many people that have a comfort zone of you being in a specific area and they don't want to see you. I see this in weight all the time. It's interesting when you look at weight, obesity is contagious, right? When you look at people and their weight, you tend to be the same weight as other friends that you are in, even if they live across the country. In fact, when people ask me what's one of the best things you can do to make sure you maintain your weight, I say find fitter friends. Hang out with them. Guess what? Same with if you want to be more successful, hang out with more successful people. Is it like sympathy loves company? Find the people. When I was going through what I was going through with my son Grant, my mother, bless her, is one of the most negative people. She doesn't mean to be. It was how she was raised. And I knew that she could drag me down so quickly. Oh, he's never going to make it. Oh my God. I was like, and she didn't even come out for a couple months because I was like, she will freak out and she will be like down the negative black hole rabbit hole. I'm not going there with her. So you just have to manage that. And honestly, if those people don't want to see you be a better version of yourself, are they really the people you should be spending your time around? I don't think so.
I love that. JJ Virgin just gave you permission to get rid of those negative energy vampires.
Well, once you do, you won't be able to be around them. Like you just won't. You'll go, oh. And some of them might step up, and that's awesome. But a lot of them won't because they're like, that's where they are,
Absolutely. So can you share a success story with us?
A success story of which type? Do you want a business one? Do you want a
business? I want business.
Oh my gosh. I got to tell you, it has been so exciting to me it was exciting when I got on the New York Times, and it was exciting when, I got my co-starring roles. It pales in comparison when I see someone who I've been working with step up to a bigger arena. I am so fortunate. I have a group called the Mindshare Collaborative. We put on an annual event of about 500 health experts and entrepreneurs, a lot of doctors. And in that, I have a mastermind group. And in the group itself, in the Mindshare Summit, just with one of the agents, we have a couple different literary agents in the group, but we've done over $50 million in book advances, which is super awesome because when publishers put that kind of money into a book, it's because they really know it's going to make a big impact out in the world. And we had one gal who came to one of our events, and in order to come to the Mindshare Summit, you actually have to be referred by someone else. And then you have to qualify, meaning that you've already got a website, you're already doing certain things to really increase your impact out in the world. And so this one gal came in, she didn't qualify the first year, she came in the second year, she applied, and she sat in the audience and we were talking about doing ebooks. And she went into her hotel room that night, she created an ebook and she put it online that night. And that ebook she started to grow and build, and that ebook became a New York Times best-selling book. And then she joined the mastermind, and I hooked her up with my agent and coached her on how to go get a 7-figure book advance. And she went and got a 7-figure book advance. And then she went out and she did a docuseries, and she launched that book. And that book became a #1 New York Times bestseller. And she has helped so many people. And that is, let's see, I've helped her. Dr. Sarah Gottfried became a New York Times bestselling author. Dr. Alan Christensen became a New York Times bestselling author. We've had so many amazing, Dr. Pedram Shojai became one. Dave Asprey became one. So, I mean, when I met Dave Asprey, he was going to self-publish The Bulletproof Diet. And I go, Dave, there's zero chance you're doing that, my friend. This is going to be a New York Times bestselling book. You're going to publish it. I'm going to hook you up with my agent. So I, looked at this and I went, how do I help 1 billion people get healthy? Well, it's not going to be me. It's going to be me plus a lot of my friends. And I can share everything that I've learned. And then I'm going to teach them. I'm going to set up a community where people want to help each other become successful, that they understand that when you help someone else's light shine, it doesn't make yours any dimmer. And so I created a community where everyone celebrates being collaborative, where they share what's working and they don't worry about the competition, and everyone's, the rising tide lifts all the boats. And it's just been amazing. And it is my greatest accomplishment besides my babies, my kids. And I can safely say, I looked down and went, it's been 1 billion people. I mean, when you look at all of these people, what they've done now, it's incredible the impact that we have, and we're changing health and healthcare.
That is beautiful. JJ, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. Before we leave, I want to ask you, what would you say to the listener right now who's grinding in their business, grinding in their life, and they need a little motivation? What would you say to them?
Well, keep grinding, because I grind every single day. And we all do. And the most successful people I see, they're grinding, and every level. It's funny. You think when you get to the next level, it's going to be easier. It's just more zeros, as one of my mentors said. And if you're feeling alone, I think the most important thing you can do to help ensure your success is grab a mentor, find someone who's already where you want to be, and grab a mastermind group. I've always been in a group, and I always have a mentor. And they have made, when you look at where I am, there are people out there from Kay Smith, who was my first one, to Ali Brown, Brendan Burchard. I owe so much to Brendan, who, when my son was in the hospital, got on a plane, flew out to me, and helped me make sure that the Virgin Diet was a success, and didn't want me to tell anyone he did it. And I'm like, dude, I'm telling everybody. So there are those people out there, Dan Sullivan and Joe Polish. I mean, the list can go on and on of people who've helped me get to where I am. You don't get there alone. And, and then you pay it forward as much as possible. So if you're doing this by yourself, go get yourself a mentor. And if you can't afford it, my first mastermind I joined, I was dead broke. That's when you really need to do it.
JJ, thank you so much for joining Your Superior Self. This has been an awesome interview.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's because you're an awesome interviewer.
I want to say thank you to JJ Virgin for joining this show and hanging out and just giving us a ton of value. She truly is the best. And JJ, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out. If this is your first episode, please leave a rating and a review, and don't forget to hit subscribe so that way you can catch up with us every week and hang out with the influencers that I have on the show. Thank you guys so much. Please follow me on Instagram at TDowns80 and on Twitter at DownsTrey. Hit me up on Facebook at Trey Downs, DOWNES. Hit me up over there and see what I got going on behind the scenes of the show. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with me today. Thank you guys, and I will talk to you guys next week. Later.